Before time wore a name, and before the world knew death, there was only chaos. And from chaos came Gaia, Uranos, and the Titans. From them came Cronus, and from Cronus came fear. When Rhea bore her children, Cronus consumed them whole. Each swallowed not with hatred, but calculation. A prophecy had reached him, low and slithering, that one of his children would overthrow him. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, all were devoured. In that damp eternal prison of his father's gut, Hades came into being, not screaming, not flailing, but listening. The flesh that surrounded him beat like drums, muffled in mud. The world outside was nothing but vibration. He couldn't see his mother's face. He didn't even know her name, but he felt his siblings, bundled in wet silence, twitching like forgotten stars. Time passed without shape. Minutes blurred into eons. Hades didn't grow like mortals do. He evolved. Thoughts came slowly, like dripping stalactites. He learned fear first, then patience, then an obsession with order. He counted every heartbeat of the Titan that caged him. When Cronus trembled with indigestion, Hades imagined it as a flaw in the system, a flaw he could exploit. Inside a belly, he became a tactician. In darkness, he discovered himself. It was Zeus who changed the rhythm. Born in secrecy and raised by the earth herself, he returned as a tempest cloaked in rebellion. With cunning allies, he gave Cronus a poison so vile, it turned time against the Titan. Cronus heaved, retched, and with violent spasms, vomited up the gods he'd consumed. Hestia first, shivering and gasping. Then Demeter, wet with bile. Then Hera, already scowling. Poseidon roared as he emerged, his anger drowning the cave. Then came Hades, quiet, skeletal, eyes like burnt coals. He stood upright in the gore of gods, unmoved. His first breath was not of awe, but inventory. 5 siblings. One sky above, one prophecy fulfilled. Zeus stepped forward, tall and electric, the storm made flesh. "You're free," he said, lightning sparking from his knuckles. Hades looked at him, the brother he had never seen, but somehow already understood. "No," he replied softly, "we are repositioned." The war that followed was not of days or seasons, but of epochs. The Olympians rose against the Titans in a clash that shattered the sky and cracked the crust of the world. Gaia moaned in her sleep as mountains were born and unmade. Oceans boiled under Poseidon's rage, and Zeus's thunder peeled the bark from sacred trees. Hades did not fight as his brothers did. He did not throw spears or roar in challenge. Instead, he vanished beneath his helm, a gift from the Cyclopes, a crown of pure shadow that made him unseen by god or beast. Where Zeus was fury and Poseidon force, Hades was precision. Invisibility made him omnipresent. The Titans whispered of curses that struck from nowhere. Food spoiled before it reached their mouths. Messengers vanished mid-sentence. Commanders were found screaming in their sleep, clawing their eyes. It was not war Hades waged, it was doubt. And doubt, he knew, was more contagious than death. He did not relish it. He did not smile. But he kept meticulous record of every victory, every collapse, every tremble in Titan ranks. Order, he whispered to himself in the din of chaos, must be constructed brick by brick. Victory came with thunder and chains. The Titans fell one by one, until Cronus knelt on shattered rock, his hands bound by the very children he had once consumed. Olympus was raised from the ashes, carved into the highest peaks, crowned by cloud and judgment. And then came the division. To avoid the envy of gods, the brothers cast lots, sacred, binding, and blind. Zeus claimed the sky, Poseidon took the seas, Hades unfolded his palm and found a pebble blacker than any night. The underworld, the dead, a kingdom of echoes. Silence followed. Hera flinched. Even Zeus looked away. There was no applause, no blessing. But when he descended into the cracks of the world, the very stones seemed to move aside for him. Hades walked alone into the earth's bowels, where even echoes feared to linger. No torch could survive the weight of that dark. No god had ever wandered so far downward. He passed through caverns of weeping stone, through rivers that hissed and sighed with unborn voices. Time thickened. The air changed from breath to memory. He did not build his palace in a day. He did not find a throne awaiting him. The underworld was a raw, feral thing, a child of entropy and sorrow. Spirits swarmed like locusts, blind and lost, shrieking in every tongue ever spoken. But Hades did not flee. He made the rocks listen. He whispered laws into the black roots of the world and commanded the rivers to take shape. Obsidian formed columns. Magma became archways. He carved the first gate himself with a blade made from a star's fossilized core. When the palace was complete, it did not sing. It hummed, low, constant, unyielding, like a heartbeat. The gates were too large for keys, too heavy for hinges, too sacred for mortal guards. So Hades created a sentinel from a piece of his own shadow and the howl of the void. Cerberus, the three-headed hound. Each head bore a name etched into its bone, past, present, and what must never be. Together they knew every soul who ever died, and every soul who would. Mortals would one day whisper of the beast as a monster, a terror, a jailer. But to Hades, Cerberus was something more, a companion, a mirror, a reminder. He placed the beast at the outer threshold, not to keep souls in, but to keep chaos out. For the dead needed peace more than punishment, and the living could not comprehend what peace truly meant. The gate closed behind him, sealed by silence. To control death, one must control memory, pain, wrath, and truth. Hades shaped the rivers from these foundations, each carved by his will, each flowing through a different vein of the underworld. Styx, the river of oaths, coiled like a serpent of iron and ink. Even Zeus swore upon it, for breaking its promise brought death to immortals. Lethe, the river of forgetting, ran cool and clear. Spirits drank its waters to shed the burdens of their past lives, becoming mist, untethered from who they were. Phlegethon, the river of fire, burned without flame. It hissed songs of agony and ambition, perfect for those who clung to their sins in death. Acheron, the river of sorrow, swallowed the laments of those who died with things left unsaid. Its banks were soft, with ash and unresolved goodbyes. And Cocytus, the river of mourning, froze over in silence. No sound escaped its surface, for it remembered every cry and trapped them beneath its ice. These rivers did not flow randomly. They moved with purpose, marking the districts of the dead. They were the nervous system of the realm. They ensured every soul, no matter how small or grand, found its way. But structure alone was not enough. The dead needed justice. Hades summoned 3 kings from the mortal realm: Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus. Just rulers in life, they were given thrones of stone beneath glowing braziers that never flickered. They judged the dead not by glory but by weight, of deeds, of regrets, of intent. Some were sent to Elysium, the bright fields where worthy souls danced in eternal twilight. Others were cast into Tartarus, where torment fit crime like skin. The rest wandered the asphodel fields, neither damned nor blessed, just forgotten. A soul once wept before Hades, begging for more time. Hades said nothing, only pointed toward Lethe. Mercy, he believed, was not always a second chance. Sometimes it was forgetfulness. Spring broke the sky like glass when Persephone walked through it. Daughter of Demeter, clothed in blossom and breath, she danced where wildflowers worshipped her. But in Hades' world, no such beauty bloomed until he saw her. He did not steal her. He watched from the edge of mortality and saw in her something he'd never known, movement untainted by fear. When she stepped among the dead during a sacred rite, the spirits bowed not in dread, but in awe. Hades approached her not as a thief, but as a question. "Would you look upon the world no one dares to name?" he asked. She did not flinch. She followed. In the underworld, Persephone did not tremble. She listened. She walked beside rivers that forgot names and touched the petals of ghostly lilies. Hades offered her a throne. She accepted, but with a price. "I will return above for half the year. Life must have its reign too," he agreed, and in doing so bound life and death in a dance eternal. They say he tricked her with a pomegranate seed, but the truth, she ate it willingly, for she had seen both sides of creation and chose to rule both. Not all justice could be measured in mortal terms. Some crimes echoed beyond death. From the ashes of vengeance and the blood of the violated, Hades shaped the Erinyes, furies with wings like razors and eyes that saw guilt like fire. They did not serve Olympus. They answered only to the unavenged. Tisiphone for murderers, Megira for the betrayers, Alecto for the oath-breakers. When kings defied law or husbands buried wives in silence, the Furies descended, their shrieks louder than divine decree. Olympus found them unbearable. Hades found them essential. "Some things," he said, "cannot be forgiven, only remembered." He gave them a sanctuary deep in the underworld, a place where no lie could survive. There they whispered, not of punishment, but of consequence. Orpheus came with music instead of weapons, a mortal whose lyre could calm beasts and charm stones into tears. He descended with nothing but grief, begging Hades for the soul of Eurydice, who had died too young. Persephone listened first, tears rising like tide, but Hades remained unmoved. Then Orpheus played. His notes were not sweet, they were raw, trembling with agony, so pure even Cerberus whimpered. The dead ceased their wandering, the rivers stilled. Hades spoke slowly, "You may take her back, but you must not look upon her until you both reach the surface." It was a test, not of music, but of trust. Orpheus led her upward, step by step, never hearing her, never certain she was there. Doubt crept like rot. He turned, and she vanished. Hades did not punish him. He said only, "Love must be stronger than fear to survive death." He ordered no guards. Orpheus left in silence, his lyre mute. That, Hades thought, was judgment enough. Sisyphus cheated death twice, once through wit, once through arrogance. He chained Thanatos, the spirit of death, and mocked the gods with false sacrifices. Mortals stopped dying, the world clogged with the unburied. Hades was furious, but not loud. He designed a punishment, not for pain, but for reflection. Sisyphus was condemned to roll a massive boulder up a hill that never ended. Each time it neared the summit, it slipped. Not because of cruelty, but because of gravity, and because Sisyphus never understood stillness. Hades watched once, unseen. The man's face burned with stubborn fury, not regret. "This is not torment," Persephone once said beside him. "No," Hades replied, "it's instruction." The helm of darkness, forged from shadows older than the stars, was not just a tool of invisibility. It made thoughts silent, footsteps forgotten, and memories brittle. With it, Hades had shaped the war. With it, he'd vanished from history to move it. But power, like death, attracts thieves. A mortal king, bribed by a jealous minor god, stole into the underworld under false rites and took the helm. Chaos erupted, souls wandered, the Furies screamed, and Cerberus howled night and day. Hades did not chase him. He sent the Erinyes. They returned, bloodied, victorious, bearing the helm and the head of the thief, eyes wide in terror even after death. Hades held the helm once more and whispered, "Even silence has a master." He sealed it in obsidian beneath his throne, bound by 3 unbreakable oaths. None, god or mortal, would wear it again without his will. Not all spirits fade. Some kings, warriors, and philosophers clung to form, refusing Elysium or even asphodel. They gathered in secret groves within the underworld, debating eternity, ethics, and the wars of the gods. Hades did not banish them. He convened a council. He listened to their insights, their judgments, their regrets. From them, he learned what Olympus forgot, that the dead do not lose wisdom, only position. He called them the Echoed Assembly and tasked them with shaping parts of the afterlife, new fields for artists, vaults for historians, and silences for the dreamers. They lived, they erred, Hades told Persephone. Let them shape what comes after. It's the only true democracy. Demeter raged when Persephone stayed in the underworld. Crops withered, snow fell out of season, mortals starved. Zeus, ever the mediator, demanded a compromise. Persephone stood tall in her obsidian gown. "I am not captive," she said. "I am queen. But balance must be honored." Thus was born the sacred rhythm of the world. For half the year, Persephone would walk the fields of the living, bringing harvest and warmth, joy and song. In those months, Hades ruled alone, his halls dim and heavy with silence. In the other half, she returned to him. With her came a bloom of moonflowers in the depths, the laughter of ghosts, and the soft strength only she could wield. This was not exile. It was a cycle. And every time she stepped through the gates, Hades was there, never smiling, but waiting. Heracles arrived, muscles coiled, sweat steaming from his brow. His 12th and final labor demanded he steal Cerberus himself and bring him to the surface. Hades raised an eyebrow. "You want my hound?" Heracles did not threaten, only to borrow. "I will return him unharmed." A long pause followed. Hades studied the mortal. Strength is common, he said, but respect is rare. He allowed it. Heracles wrestled Cerberus, not with cruelty, but with will. He succeeded, dragging the beast to daylight, and true to his word, he brought him back. Cerberus returned, not snarling, but with something close to admiration. Hades looked down at Heracles and said, "Even the dead admire promises kept." Deep in the silent veins of the underworld lay a forge that no flame kindled and no bellows fed. It was powered by the regrets of the dead, each sigh, each unspoken truth, each moment someone wished they had more time. Hades alone could enter. There, he crafted artifacts not for war, but for order, a scale that weighed not mass but meaning, a mirror that revealed true self beneath falsehood, and chains that only bound those who lied. He worked in silence, shaping instruments that Olympus would never understand. One day, Persephone joined him. She placed her hand on his shoulder. "You build so much," she said, "but never for yourself." "I rule what remains," he answered. "What I build must outlast even me." Every 100 years, Hades opened the gates to all the dead, not for judgment, but remembrance. No music played, no offerings were made. The dead gathered in stillness, recalling names, regrets, the warmth of rain, and the scent of bread. They did not speak, they simply existed. Even the Furies attended, draped in veils. Cerberus lay beside them, heads bowed. Hades walked among the shades. He did not declare, he did not bless. He merely sat, sometimes beside a child, sometimes beside a murderer. Time flattened, and for one night no soul was condemned or praised, only acknowledged. "This is not grief," he whispered to Persephone, watching the quiet unfold. "This is continuity." A mortal philosopher once requested to die with his eyes open and mind awake, to speak with Hades and ask questions none dared voice. When he arrived at the threshold, Hades obliged. "Ask," the god said. "Why death?" asked the man. "Because stasis corrupts faster than decay." "Why memory?" "Because forgetting is a second death." "Why you?" Hades paused. "Because I am the only one who listened when silence spoke." The philosopher nodded. He did not ask for paradise or punishment. He asked only for a quiet space to think. Hades gave him a garden beside Lethe, where the man could forget when ready, but never before. There came a time when a rogue demigod sought immortality by draining the breath of the dying, believing it to be the essence of life. When his crimes grew bold, Hades visited him in person, not as a storm, but as a shadow that filled every corner of the room. "You steal what was never yours to hold," Hades said. "I take what mortals waste," the thief replied. "So you think yourself a collector?" Hades stepped forward, the temperature dropping. "Let me show you what true possession looks like." The breathless souls the thief had consumed burst forth from his body, screaming in reverse. They swarmed him, not to punish, but to reclaim. The demigod's own breath was the last to leave, curling into Hades' hand like smoke. He let it go. A mortal cult rose, preaching a paradise beyond death, untouched by gods. They built temples that promised joy without judgment, reward without reflection. Their numbers swelled. Funerals turned silent. Offerings to the underworld dwindled. Hades did not retaliate. He watched. Then, one night, he invited their high priest to descend. The man came willingly, smiling with certainty. "You have no power over belief," he said. Hades showed him the asphodel fields, the cries of those forgotten, the groves of the nearly blessed, the screams in Tartarus, the laughter in Elysium. "This," Hades said, "is not control. It is the truth." The priest begged to stay, weeping. "You may," Hades allowed, "but not as a prophet, as a listener." Beyond even the furthest valley of the underworld, past where the rivers no longer run, lies the final gate. A door that leads not to torment, not to bliss, but to oblivion. It is locked. Only Hades holds the key. He forged it from the remnants of a dead star, binding it with a vow none but he may utter. He opened it once. Behind it, he found the end of identity, where names dissolve, where memory unknots, where not even the fates dare look. He closed the door, hands trembling. "We need an end," he whispered, "but not yet." He has never returned. Persephone once asked what he saw. He only answered, "The mirror with no reflection." One day, Olympus quieted. No thunder, no waves, no festivals. A mortal army, driven by ambition and armed with forgotten magic, had wounded the gods themselves. Zeus vanished into storm. Poseidon retreated beneath the waves. Apollo's temple burned. The dead arrived faster than the underworld could receive them. Hades did not panic. He stepped into the mortal world just once, unshrouded, crowned in obsidian. Where he walked, war ceased, not from mercy but paralysis. Soldiers fell to their knees, overwhelmed by the weight of every soul they'd created. "I am not your enemy," Hades said. "I am your archive." He returned to his realm, carrying the names of the fallen. He etched each one into a wall of dark stone, a monument that no rain would erode. As centuries passed, Persephone's role grew. She was not merely queen. She became interpreter of the living, the one who could still hear the heartbeat of the world above. She shaped new laws. Leniency for those who died unjustly, refuge for children lost to famine and plague. Under her gaze, the underworld softened, not in weakness, but in grace. When she walked beside Hades, the realm pulsed with balance. They were not opposites. They were rhythm. One day, a lost soul asked her, "Do you love him?" Persephone smiled. "I chose this realm, and I choose it still." While Olympus basked in praise, while statues rose to Zeus and songs sang of Athena, Hades remained beneath, unworshipped, uninvited to temples, unspoken in prayer. Mortals feared him, mistaking his realm for cruelty, his silence for apathy. But Hades did not demand altars. He did not hurl bolts or flood cities. He watched. Every mortal would meet him. Every soul would feel his presence. What need had he for temples when the earth itself whispered his name with every grave dug? In secret, a few did honor him. Farmers who buried tools at harvest, mothers who placed coins on their children's eyes, philosophers who burned laurel in his name. To them Hades sent dreams, not of dread, but of peace, of structure, of justice, of a god who waited, always with open hands. In the end, when the stars falter and the threads of the fates unravel, it will not be Zeus who remains, not Poseidon, not even the sun. It will be Hades, standing at the edge of time, counting the final soul, closing the last gate, not in sorrow, not in triumph, but in completion. And when all stories are done, when no one is left to tell them, one final breath will echo through the dark, saying only, and that is the story of Hades. Before the gods wore names and the sky had a voice, there was only silence, vast, starless, and waiting. But silence cannot last forever. From this abyss rose Gaia, the earth, and Uranus, the sky. And from them, the Titans, monstrous, majestic, and proud, ruled the world. Cronus was the cruelest among them, sharp-eyed and sharper still with his sickle, which he used to overthrow his own father. He believed he had shattered fate itself, but fate is not easily undone. A prophecy slithered through the cracks of his new reign. One day, one of your children will rise against you and succeed where your father failed. Cronus, gripped by terror no crown could soothe, made a monstrous vow. Each time his wife Rhea bore him a child, he swallowed it whole. One scream, one breath, one gulp. Over and over, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, gone into his endless gut like they never existed. Rhea's sorrow burned white hot, so when her final child was born beneath a crescent moon on the Isle of Crete, she acted. She wrapped a jagged rock in cloth and gave it to Cronus, whispering false lullabies as he devoured it. Meanwhile, the real child, a baby boy with eyes like stormlight and lungs that cried like thunder, was carried far from the throne of lies. His name was Zeus. Raised in a sacred cave on Mount Ida, Zeus was nourished by the milk of Amalthea, a divine goat, and protected by warriors called the Curetes, who clashed their bronze weapons to mask his infant wails. Each day he grew stronger. Each night he dreamed of fire and thrones and justice. By the time he could walk, clouds would gather when he clenched his fists. When he wept, the winds howled through the gorge. Power, raw, celestial, ancient, was waking in him. And one fateful dusk, as stars blinked open like watching eyes, Zeus turned to the cave's entrance. He was no longer a boy. "I can feel them," he said to the air. "My brothers, my sisters, they're alive, and I will free them." The mountain whispered back, "Then begin." Zeus left Mount Ida as a shadow in moonlight. His curls were wild as smoke, and his shoulders bore the sky like it belonged to him. But the world outside the cave was not yet his. It belonged to Cronus, a king of dust and fear who ruled not through love, but through hunger. Rhea, watching from afar, sent him to a Titaness named Metis, goddess of wisdom and deep planning. Her eyes were older than memory, and when she looked at Zeus, she did not flinch. "You are not ready to fight," she said, grinding herbs into a black clay bowl. "Your father is strong, and you are untested." Zeus sat, patient. "Then teach me." And so she did. He learned not just power, but control. Not just rage, but restraint. She taught him how the sky listened to his voice, how it could bend or break at his command. And finally, she gave him a vial filled with shining liquid. When Cronus drinks this, she said, his body will turn against him, and the gods inside him will claw their way free, determined. Then it's time, Zeus said. With a cloak of starlight and a face wrapped in glamour, Zeus descended into the great palace of Cronus at Mount Othrys. He arrived as a stranger, a noble wanderer from distant lands, and offered his services to the Titan king. Cronus, aging and bloated from his own madness, cuckolds, laughed mockingly. Another servant? Why not? Zeus bowed, hiding the storm in his veins. For days he served wine to the Titan court. He listened, he learned, he waited. And then, on a night where the sky swelled with unseen tension, he brought the poisoned drink to Cronus. Calmly, "To your eternal reign," Zeus said. Cronus lifted the goblet, mockingly. "Cuffs, eternal, of course." He drank. Moments later, his gut twisted like a serpent. His eyes went wide. He screamed, a roar that shook the columns of the palace. And then, one by one, the swallowed gods exploded from his mouth in blinding bursts of divine light. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon. They collapsed, gasping, blinking at the world they hadn't seen in centuries. Cronus wheezed, half dead on the marble floor. What are you?" Zeus's disguise dropped. Thunder echoed in his voice. "I am your son. I am Zeus, and your time is over." The escape of Cronus's children lit the sky with fire. From the heights of Mount Othrys to the depths of Tartarus, the Titan realm shook with dread. Cronus, wounded and humiliated, summoned his brethren, mighty Titans like Iapetus, Hyperion, and Atlas, and bellowed across the heavens. "My throne is threatened. My blood has betrayed me. Let there be war." And war came. Zeus led his newly freed siblings to the base of Mount Olympus, the tallest peak in Greece, where clouds cradled its summit like a cradle for kings. There, they built a sanctuary, not of stone or gold, but of raw divine will. It was not yet the Olympus of legend, but it was home. Poseidon, wild and untamed, shaped rivers into fortresses and called sea creatures from the depths to guard them. Hades raised shadows like soldiers. Hera, regal and resolute, began organizing strategy with the mind of a queen. Demeter grew thorns and vines that lashed like whips. Hestia lit flames that never went out. But it was Zeus, Zeus alone, who called upon the sky itself. With one raised arm, he summoned lightning. With another, he parted clouds like silk. And when he spoke, the winds themselves leaned in to listen. Still, they were outnumbered, so Metis returned with one final secret. In the pit of Tartarus, she whispered, lie the Hecatoncheires, the 100-handed ones, and the Cyclopes, your father's prisoners. Release them, and they will serve the one who gives them freedom. Zeus nodded. Then I will go to hell. Tartarus was not just a place. It was a wound in the fabric of existence. A black chasm beneath the underworld, deeper than any mortal could fathom, sealed by ancient curses and guarded by monsters who had never known the sun. But Zeus, wrapped in the armor of thunder, descended. Each step downward was like falling through time itself, past the caves of sorrow, past the screaming winds, past the rivers of forgetting and fire. And finally, there, bound in chains forged by Cronus himself, lay the 3 Hecatoncheires and the 3 Cyclops. They did not look up. Their eyes were closed, heads bowed in eternal agony. Their breath rattled the walls. Their wrists were swollen from millennia in iron. Zeus approached the nearest one, Briareus, whose 100 arms drooped like vines, and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You were betrayed," Zeus said. "But I offer something greater than vengeance. I offer freedom, and a war worth fighting." Briareus opened one blood-red eye. "You are not Cronus," firmly. "No," Zeus replied. "I'm the end of him." And with a bolt of lightning, not thrown, but wielded like a blade, Zeus shattered the chains. The air shook. One by one, the giants stood. The Cyclops blinked and grinned with single-eyed fury. The Hecatoncheires flexed their 100 fists. The earth above trembled at their awakening. "What is your command?" Briareus rumbled. Zeus turned toward the light above. "We rise." The sky had not seen such fury since its birth. When Zeus returned from Tartarus with the freed giants at his back, Olympus roared with a new kind of power. Briareus, Cottus, and Gyges each towered like mountains, with 100 arms and 100 weapons. The Cyclops, grateful beyond words, offered Zeus their greatest gifts: Thunderbolt, the most powerful weapon ever forged; the trident, which they gave to Poseidon so he might command every sea; the helm of invisibility, offered to Hades so he might strike unseen. With their powers reforged and their armies gathered, the gods marched to war. For 10 years, the battle raged. Titanomachy, they would call it. The war of the gods, lightning and fire, storms and darkness. Clashing on the plains of Thessaly, the ground was scorched black with divine rage. Titans hurled mountains. Gods shattered them in midair. Trees withered at the sound of the sky's scream. Rivers boiled. The sun vanished behind smoke. Cronus led the charge, wielding his sickle, the same one he had once used to betray his father. He faced Zeus himself, and the two met in a clash of father and son, tyrant and liberator. "You are nothing but a child," Cronus sneered, "born from fear, fed by lies." Zeus didn't flinch. "And you are a relic." There where weapons collided with a sound like the beginning of time. The war tilted. Sometimes Cronus gained ground, sometimes Zeus. The other gods battled across the world, oceans stormed by Poseidon, volcanoes raised by Hephaestus, shadows creeping at Hades' command. But the battle would not end until fate decided. In the thick of war, alliances frayed. Not all Titans were loyal to Cronus. Some whispered doubts, and one, Prometheus, even defected to Zeus, offering counsel, wisdom, and strategy. But among Cronus's most trusted was Atlas, tall as sky and strong enough to hold the heavens if asked. One night, as stars flickered like dying sparks over the battlefield, Zeus sought to turn Atlas. "We don't have to be enemies," Zeus offered. "Help me, and when we win, you will not be forgotten." Atlas stood on a cliffside, looking over the ruins of what had once been a sacred grove. "You think you are a god of mercy, but you are still a god of war. War ends, Zeus said, if we win. But Atlas refused. If you were truly just, you'd lay down your weapon now. He walked away, a mountain of muscle, pride, and sorrow. When the final battle came, Atlas fought with fury unmatched, striking down whole armies of gods and giants. He knocked Hades from the air and broke 3 Cyclopean axes in half. But when he finally faced Zeus again, there was no conversation this time. Just a bolt, one strike, impossibly fast, impossibly bright, hit Atlas in the chest. He fell with a roaring roar that split the sky in half. And Zeus, grim-faced, ordered him not to death, but to punishment. From this day on, he decreed, you will hold the sky itself on your shoulders, not in battle, but in silence, until the end of time. Atlas said nothing. He knelt, and the heavens fell onto his back like a crown of weight. The war drew to its end with thunder in the air and silence on the wind. The Titans were weakening. The gods were rising. Zeus stood tall on the peak of Mount Olympus, surrounded by his siblings and the storm-forged warriors who had fought by his side. Below them, Cronus and his remaining followers made one final stand. The battlefield was shattered, scorched black from lightning, rivers turned to steam, the air filled with ash and god fire. The sky pulsed with rage, and time itself seemed to slow as father and son faced one another again. You were always destined to betray me, Cronus growled, the sickle in his hand cracked and glowing red, just like I betrayed mine. No, Zeus said softly, that's what you did. I choose a different end. Cronus lunged. Lightning flashed. The clash was like a volcano splitting the heavens, blade against bolt, past against future. They fought atop a broken cliff, feet skimming the air, fists colliding with enough force to bend clouds. Every blow Zeus landed shook the earth, and then a final roaring roar from the sky, a burst of light that blinded even gods. Zeus drove the thunderbolt through Cronus's chest. The Titan king fell. But Zeus did not kill him. Instead, he called to his brothers. Hades, Poseidon, come. Together they bound Cronus in unbreakable chains, forged in the heart of Tartarus. The Titan's crown rolled across the stone and stopped at Zeus's feet. He did not put it on. We won't rule like him, Zeus said. Not alone, not through fear. The world took its first peaceful breath in 10 years. Victory had come, but peace required more than triumph. It required order. High atop the newborn throne room of Olympus, carved into clouds, illuminated by starfire, the gods gathered. The sky was clear for the first time in years. The wind was warm. The world watched, waiting to see what would follow a war of gods. Zeus rose and held out 3 stones, each identical in shape, but veined with different elements: water, flame, and shadow. Let fate decide where we rule, he said. He turned to Poseidon. Brother of the waves, choose first. Poseidon drew the stone veined in blue, the ocean, his eyes lit with wild joy. The sea is mine, he declared, and the tides obeyed. Hades stepped forward and drew next. His hand gripped the darkest stone, filled with swirling shadows. The Underworld, he murmured, eyes unreadable. I accept it. I will rule the dead with justice. Zeus stepped forward last. The final stone pulsed with light and wind. "The sky," he said, "the throne above all others." And so it was. Poseidon descended to the oceans, carving palaces from coral and kelp. Hades vanished into the deep dark, raising a city of silver bones and silent halls. And Zeus remained on Olympus, not just as king, but as protector. With lightning at his side and the heavens beneath his gaze, he watched over gods and mortals alike. But peace, even divine peace, is never eternal. Zeus ruled the skies, but his heart, the wild, roiling storm at the center of his being, longed for balance. The war had given him purpose, but not peace. As Olympus settled, he found himself drawn to the goddess who had stood beside him in battle, her gaze steady even as the world burned. Hera. She was no simple consort. She was fire-bound in elegance, logic wrapped in regality. She challenged him in council, argued strategy during the war, and refused to kneel after it. That defiance intrigued Zeus more than any praise ever could. One evening, atop Olympus with the wind singing softly, Zeus approached her. "You fought as fiercely as I did," he said. "I fought harder," she replied, eyes never leaving the horizon. "I want you to rule with me," Zeus said. "Not beside me, but with me." Hera turned. "And when you tire of my challenge, will you cast me aside like mortal kings do?" Zeus raised his hand and thunder rolled in response. "I am not a mortal king." For a moment, the storm quieted. They wed beneath the boughs of the sacred tree of life, as the clouds themselves bowed in homage. Gods from every corner of the world came to witness the union, a marriage of sky and strategy, lightning and law. Together, they forged the laws of Olympus, binding gods with oaths stronger than chains. But even love, wrapped in lightning, casts shadows. Hera watched her husband with wary eyes. Zeus, the storm, was difficult to contain, and the seeds of jealousy, loyalty, and control began to sprout. Slow, subtle, inevitable. While Olympus bathed in new order, the world below remained wild and unfinished. Mankind, weak, flickering things made from earth and spirit, wandered the forests in ignorance and cold. Zeus had watched them with disinterest. Mortals, to him, were fragile and brief, like sparks from a fire that would soon fade. But Prometheus did not share his apathy. The Titan who had once turned against Cronus now defied Zeus, not in war, but in compassion. He knelt beside the mortals and taught them how to shape tools. He whispered the names of stars and seasons into their dreams. He watched them grow. And when he saw them shiver in winter, he made a choice that would change everything. He stole fire from the hearth of Olympus, sacred flame, meant only for gods, and carried it to the humans. The moment the fire touched their hands, their world changed. They built hearths. They forged blades. They began to write, to create, to dream beyond their fragile lifespans. Zeus was furious. "He has given them power," the Sky King said, thunder booming across the clouds. "He has taught them divine rebellion." "He taught them to survive," Hera countered. But Zeus had made his choice. He summoned Prometheus to Olympus, and when the Titan refused to repent, Zeus ordered his punishment. Chained to a cliff at the edge of the world, Prometheus would endure, an eagle sent each day to feast on his liver, which would grow back every night, a lesson in divine boundaries, a symbol of eternal debt. But as the eagle flew each day, fire continued to burn below. in homes, in forges, in hearts. Zeus had struck one rebel down, but he had lit the first spark of mortal destiny. Though chained, Prometheus had ignited something Zeus could not extinguish. The humans, once shivering shadows in the wild, became builders of cities. They raised temples in honor of the gods, but also walls in defense of themselves. They feared Zeus, yes, but fear was no longer the only force that moved them. Now they had fire. Now they had will. Zeus watched from Olympus, frowning. "They forget who made them," he muttered, thunder curling around his words. "They remember," Hestia said softly, "but they are becoming something more." Poseidon, brooding beneath the ocean, warned his brother, "The more you try to control them, the more they'll resist." Hera agreed, in part. "You are not wrong to demand respect, but you cannot command love." Zeus didn't reply. He descended. Disguised as a traveler, he walked among mortals. He heard their prayers, their songs, their curses. He saw offerings laid beneath statues of himself, roasted lamb, garlands, carved stone, but also mockery whispered in the dark. One boy, barefoot and bright-eyed, stared up at a stormy sky and said aloud, "If the gods want to rule us, let them live as we do. If they feel hunger, let them judge." Zeus almost struck him down, almost. But something stopped him. The humans were no longer just his creations. They were challenges to the divine narrative. He had created the spark, and now it burned without him. War may have ended on the plains of Thessaly, but storms still brewed within Olympus, especially in Zeus himself. One night, Zeus felt an unbearable pressure in his skull, as though a thunderstorm had taken root behind his eyes. No healer could ease the pain. No herb or godly wine dulled it. He staggered through Olympus, clutching his head, until he fell at the foot of the divine forge. "Strike it open," he commanded. Hephaestus, wide-eyed, raised his hammer. "Are you certain?" "Now!" With one mighty blow to the god-king's skull, the forge echoed, and from the wound sprang a fully grown goddess, clad in gleaming armor, her eyes burning with clarity, her voice already wise. Athena, daughter of thought and thunder, born not of flesh, but of will and wisdom. The gods stood in awe. She helped Zeus to his feet before he could even speak. "You are not just a warrior," she said. "You are a symbol, and symbols must evolve." Athena became the goddess of wisdom, war, and justice, not a destroyer, but a strategist, not a thunderbolt, but the hand that aimed it. Zeus saw in her the future of Olympus, power refined, mind sharpened, justice weighed, and yet he feared her too. For Athena represented a force he could not control with might alone. Not fear, not love, but reason. Hera, queen of Olympus, felt the tension rising like storm clouds behind her temples. She had watched Zeus descend among mortals in disguise, watched him return with strange silence and distant eyes. And worse, she had heard the whispers of women, of children born without her blessing, of divine bastards. Hera was not a goddess who tolerated betrayal. When she learned of Semele, a mortal woman carrying Zeus's child, her rage turned cold. Disguised as an old woman, Hera visited Semele and planted a seed of doubt. "If your child is truly fathered by Zeus, ask him to reveal himself in his true form. Demand to see him as the gods do." Semele did, And when Zeus, bound by love and oath, appeared in his full glory, lightning pouring from his skin, eyes brighter than suns, Semele was incinerated in an instant. But Zeus saved the unborn child, sewing it into his thigh until it was ready to be born. That child would become Dionysus, god of wine, madness, and revelry. Hera, denied satisfaction, grew colder still. She punished Zeus's lovers, hounded his children, twisted fate against any who threatened her crown. But her greatest enemy was not some mortal woman. It was time, and the knowledge that love rooted in fear cannot grow forever. The gods, once united by war, began to fracture under the weight of eternity. Ares, god of war, son of Zeus and Hera, grew reckless, stirring conflict among mortals just to watch them bleed. He boasted of conquest and disdained the peace that Athena carefully brokered between warring city-states. Hephaestus, the crippled smith, burned with quiet resentment. Cast from Olympus by Hera for his imperfection, he returned only at Zeus's command, and never forgot who had thrown him. Apollo and Artemis, twins born of Zeus and the Titaness Leto, wandered far from Olympus, creating their own courts and cults. They loved their father, but lived apart, knowing Hera's eyes never left them. Even Hermes, the clever trickster and herald of the gods, questioned the order of Olympus in private. The divine palace had become a mirror of mortal courts, whispers behind columns, alliances in shadow, truth wrapped in golden lies. One day, Hera gathered Poseidon and Athena in secret. "Zeus has ruled alone for too long," she said. "His will is law, but law must be shared. Olympus is not his alone." Athena, quiet, weighed the truth. Poseidon grunted, always resentful of his younger brother's throne. Together they plotted to overthrow him, not to kill him, but to bind him, to humble him. They crafted chains of unbreakable adamantine, and while Zeus slept in his chamber, they struck. Lightning tried to rise, but the chains were fastened. For a moment, a single breath in the life of gods, Zeus was imprisoned. But the gods had not counted on Thetis, the sea nymph, who summoned Briareos, the 100-handed giant, loyal still to Olympus. He broke the chains in moments. Zeus stood, unscathed, but changed. He looked at each of them, wife, brother, daughter, and said quietly, "Even among gods, trust is a fragile thing." And from that day on, Zeus slept with one eye open, and Olympus never truly rested again. In the shadow of Mount Parnassus, hidden within a temple, built by whispers and visions, lived the oracle of Delphi, a mortal touched by Apollo, voice of prophecy, bound by truths even the gods could not rewrite. Zeus visited her rarely, for her visions were not flattery, and her gaze burned through illusion. But now, after his near overthrow, he came. The oracle sat in trance, breathing in the vapors of the earth, her hair floating as if under water. When Zeus entered, thunder tried to follow, but the room remained still. "You seek reassurance," she said, eyes glowing, "but I offer only vision." "I want to know if Olympus stands," Zeus replied, "if I rule forever." The oracle laughed, a soft, sorrowful thing. even eternity frays. She reached out and traced a thread through the air, golden and trembling. You rule by thunder, but thunder cracks. You father heroes, but heroes rise. You clutch fate, but fate was never yours to hold. Zeus frowned. Then whose is it? 3 sisters, she whispered, older than time, the Moirai, the Fates. Zeus had heard their name before. Spinners, measurers, cutters of life's thread. Even gods had threads. Even he had one. He left Delphi silent, unsettled, and for the first time in millennia, the king of Olympus felt something he had forgotten. Fear. The world of men had grown, cities shining like stars on the land, temples ringing with hymns, philosophers debating fate under olive trees. But from this world, shaped in defiance and gifted with fire, came one who would shake Olympus to its core. Heracles. Born of Zeus and a mortal woman named Alcmene, Heracles was a child of staggering strength and impossible destiny. Hera, enraged once more by Zeus's betrayal, tried to kill the boy in his cradle, sending 2 serpents to strangle him. But Heracles reached out, cooing softly, and crushed the snakes with a giggle. The world took notice. Zeus watched his son from afar, pride warring with guilt. He saw in Heracles not just strength, but something rarer, mercy. For every beast he slew, the boy saved 2 villagers. For every battle, he wept afterward. As Heracles grew, the gods whispered, "He's the strongest mortal alive." Stronger than some gods, stronger than Zeus, one day. Zeus heard them, but rather than stop it, he leaned into fate. He assigned his son impossible tasks, 12 labors meant to break him: slay the Nemean lion, capture Cerberus, cleanse stables in a single day. Each time, Heracles returned, bloodied but unbowed. The people loved him, the gods respected him, and the stars watched silently. Heracles wasn't just a hero, he was the first threat to Olympus from below. And Zeus, who had once been the son of a tyrant, now watched his own son walk a path disturbingly familiar. Great power comes at great cost. Heracles, though praised as a savior and a god in mortal flesh, carried burdens heavier than the beasts he slew. Hera, still furious, still grieving in her own way, struck him, not with a blade, but with madness. In a moment of divine cruelty, she clouded his mind, twisted his vision, and in that haze of confusion, Heracles slaughtered his own wife and children. When the madness lifted and the blood dried, the strongest man in the world wept like a child. The mortals he'd saved turned away in fear. The gods who'd admired him fell silent, and Heracles, unable to undo what had been done, wandered into the mountains, broken. Zeus saw everything. He sat on his throne atop Olympus, fists clenched, thunder silent around him. "I gave him greatness," he muttered, "and she gave him ruin." Hera did not respond. She stood beside her husband, arms folded, gaze fixed forward. "You made him a weapon," she said softly, "and now you're surprised he's shattered in your hand." Zeus turned to her, voice low. "He is our son, only when it suits you." The silence between them stretched longer than storms. Below, Heracles performed his labors to atone, not because Zeus demanded it, but because he needed purpose. It was the one thing mortals craved most. In time, Heracles would earn his place on Olympus, not as a god born, but as a mortal who became one. But Zeus never forgave himself for what the boy had to endure to get there. Legacy, he learned, was not built in thunder. It was carved in suffering. One day, when the sun lingered longer than usual and the clouds forgot to gather, Zeus stood alone on the edge of Olympus. Below him stretched the world. From shining Athens to the dark forests of Thrace, from the wine-soaked isles to the howling mountains of the north. He felt old. Not in body, his form remained timeless, but in presence. He had ruled since the first bolt-struck sky. He had tamed chaos, defeated titans, built kingdoms, sired gods and monsters alike. And still, he watched the world change. Mortals no longer feared, as they once did. They questioned, they studied stars, mapped oceans, asked where thunder came from. They lit fires without him. A part of him burned with pride. Another part whispered, "You were once a rebel too." He sat on the stone edge and closed his eyes. In that moment, a dream came, not crafted by Hypnos or Morpheus, but something older. He saw a future, temples cracked, statues toppled, Olympus overgrown with ivy, the gods fading not in death, but in memory. And in that future, Zeus stood alone, not as a king, but as a story, a myth. He opened his eyes slowly. Maybe that's how it was meant to be. Even gods are measured, not by the thunder they summon, but by what echoes after. The whisper came, not from a god, nor oracle, nor dream, but from the earth itself. Gaia, mother of all, stirred in her sleep, and when she woke, she sent forth a warning, older than the Titans. One day, a child of Zeus shall rise, and he will overthrow his father, as you did yours. The prophecy spread like wildfire across Olympus. Zeus, once the breaker of chains, now felt the manacles of destiny tighten around his own wrists. He called the Moirai, the Fates, to his throne. 3 sisters, veiled in shadow, who spun and measured and cut the thread of life for all creatures, mortal and divine. "Tell me," Zeus demanded, "which son?" The eldest Fate, her fingers trembling over her golden thread, replied, "We do not know. The thread is woven, but the wind blurs the face. Can it be stopped? No, but it can be delayed." Zeus left them without another word. He looked to every corner of the world, searching for omens. He watched his sons, Apollo with his music and visions, Ares with his bloodlust, Dionysus with his revelry. But none felt like the one, not yet. Still he grew paranoid. He tested their loyalty. He withheld his full power. He slept lighter than ever, the thunder always pulsing beneath his skin. He had once been the storm that freed the world. Now he was the king, waiting for the lightning to strike him. But prophecy was not the only threat. Deep beneath the earth, in a prison of magma and silence, stirred a force unlike any the gods had ever faced, not born of betrayal, but of wrath. Typhon, born of Gaia and Tartarus, as vengeance for the defeat of the Titans. Typhon was no mere beast. His voice shook continents, his breath melted stone, his 100 heads screamed in different tongues, each more hateful than the last. When he broke free, the earth itself howled, mountains cracked, oceans recoiled. The sky dimmed as smoke and ash choked the stars. Typhon rose like a living apocalypse, and for the first time in his rule, Zeus was afraid. The gods fled Olympus, Poseidon vanished beneath the waves, Apollo fled to the far corners of the world. Hera, transformed into a bird, took to the skies. Zeus stood alone, and Typhon came. The battle that followed was not one of strategy, it was chaos. Lightning met hurricane, fire met storm. Typhon's roars ripped valleys into canyons. Zeus's bolts shattered entire islands, but Typhon was not a titan. He was nature's fury given flesh, and Zeus, despite all his power, began to fall. The great king was torn from the sky, his tendons ripped out, his weapons cast to the winds. He fell broken to the earth. The gods despaired. Olympus trembled. And the world asked, "Is the age of Zeus over?" Zeus lay in a hidden cave on the slopes of Mount Etna, bones mended by time, but spirit fractured by defeat. Typhon roamed the earth unchecked, tearing through cities, sending mortals fleeing to the sea. Even the gods, scattered across the world, whispered doubts they never dared voice before. Perhaps the age of Zeus is ending, but not all had abandoned him. Hermes, fleet-footed and sharp-eyed, found the cave. He knelt beside Zeus and placed a hand on his chest. "The world still believes in you," he said. "I still believe." Zeus did not speak, but his eyes flickered. Next came Pan, the wild god of nature, who had once played flutes in Zeus's court, and now risked everything to recover the stolen sinews of the god-king. He crept into Typhon's lair, tricked the monster with illusions, and retrieved Zeus's divine tendons. Hermes returned them, and with a thunderclap that cracked the air in 3 directions, Zeus stood once more, not just as a god, but as a symbol. "I was made of lightning," he said, "but now I understand the fire beneath it." He rose to the peak of Mount Olympus, called down his bolts from the clouds, and cast his voice across the heavens. "Let the sky remember me." And it did. The thunder returned. The world trembled with relief, and the gods answered. The sky darkened over Mount Haemus. Typhon, seeing Zeus reborn, roared with hatred that split the moonlight. But this time Zeus was not alone. Poseidon rose from the ocean, trident in hand, waves crashing behind him. Hades emerged from the shadows, silent and still, with the helm of darkness. Athena took to the skies, her armor shining like the first dawn. Even Dionysus arrived, riding a chariot of panthers, laughter on his lips, madness in his eyes. And Heracles, immortal now, raised his club and stood beside his father. Zeus looked to his allies. Let this be the last. The battle began not with a cry, but with a silence so complete it crushed the air. Then, thunder, fire, shadow, wind, divine fury from all directions. Zeus and Typhon clashed once more, but this time Zeus moved with clarity. No longer just a god of power, but of purpose. Every bolt he hurled was forged from memory, every strike a lesson. Typhon faltered, and Zeus summoned the might of every star, every storm, every prayer ever whispered in fear or awe. With a final blinding bolt, he split Typhon. The monster fell screaming into the earth, where the gods sealed him beneath mountains and molten stone. Peace returned. But it was not the same peace. It was a peace earned, not granted. And the sky, once trembling, was calm again. After Typhon's fall, the gods returned to Olympus, not as conquerors, but as survivors. Zeus called a gathering, not of war, not of punishment, but of truth. They met beneath the highest peak, where clouds rolled lazily like silk, and stars glimmered even at noon. Zeus stood before them, thunderbolt at his side, but not in hand. For too long, he said, we have ruled, as if Olympus were unshakable. But even gods fall. I fell. We all have. No one interrupted him. I once believed strength alone was enough, that storms could silence fate, that fear could govern loyalty. I was wrong. He looked to Athena. Wisdom saved me. To Hermes. Loyalty restored me. To Heracles. Mortal heart reminded me why I fight. He stepped down from his platform and stood among the other gods, shoulder to shoulder. Olympus is not a throne, he said. It is a promise. Poseidon nodded. Hera said nothing, but her eyes softened. Even Ares, whose hands had never known stillness, looked to the sky in quiet reflection. And so, the gods reforged their pact, not just to rule, but to serve the balance. For a time, peace held. Temples rang with laughter and prayer. Seasons passed gently. Stars watched from above, and storms became symbols, not omens. Zeus knew peace was never permanent. It had to be chosen, again and again. Years passed, then decades, then centuries. Mortals aged, gods endured. Zeus watched empires rise and fall. Egypt, Babylon, Persia, Rome. He watched men sculpt him in marble, etch his name into scrolls, and shout his stories over campfires. But he also watched them forget. New gods came, new prophets, new tongues. The temples grew quiet, the offerings ceased, the statues crumbled. On a quiet night, Zeus stood in a ruined shrine, once golden, now choked with ivy. A mortal boy wandered in, curious. He looked up at the broken likeness of the god and tilted his head. "Who was this?" the boy asked aloud. Zeus smiled from the shadows. "No one you'd believe." He left the boy unharmed and walked into the forest. The world no longer bowed to him, but in its bones, it remembered. Every crack of thunder, every flicker of lightning, every story passed down, twisted, faded, but alive. Zeus did not need temples to rule. He had become something greater, not just a god, a myth, and myths never die. Time stretched onward like an endless ribbon. Zeus, though immortal, felt its presence, not in his bones, which never aged, but in his spirit, which bore the memories of an entire world. Every war, every betrayal, every moment of triumph or tragedy left a mark, not on his body, but his being. He began to walk among mortals more frequently, not to rule, but to observe. He watched as they invented machines, mapped the stars he once claimed as his own, and whispered truths in tongues even the gods hadn't heard. He watched them forget Olympus, but not lightning. They still feared the storm, still flinched when thunder cracked through the sky. And in that fear, there was still a trace of him, He visited Delphi, long since abandoned. The sacred flames had gone out, but when he touched the altar it flickered, one last time. He sat beside the sea with Poseidon, neither speaking. He met Hades at the edge of a dying star, and together they watched it collapse in silence. "Is this what we were meant for?" Zeus asked. "To rule, only to fade." Hades, ever grim, replied, "No, we were meant to be remembered." One final storm. Zeus stood atop Olympus, now overgrown and crumbling, but still towering above the world. The sky churned, not with anger, but with reverence. He closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to listen. To every prayer that had ever been spoken in his name, to every cry, every whispered plea, every celebration under his stars, they echoed within him like wind through the pines, soft, eternal, unbroken. Then, slowly, he raised his hand to the heavens and called down one last bolt of lightning. It struck not in wrath, but in gratitude, illuminating the mountain, the world, and the past. Then he turned and walked into the clouds. He did not vanish. He simply became the sky, became the silence after thunder, became the idea of a god. And so the story of Zeus, king of gods, breaker of chains, father of storms, did not end. It echoed, in thunder, in myth, in you.